Develop our topic of purely competitive firms. What I have up here is I have a small cost chart, if you will. We have the quantity of the good, we have our average fixed cost, our average variable cost, our average total cost, our marginal cost, and our marginal revenue. Actually, this is the same chart that we had in an earlier chapter. I believe it was the cost of production. And we have these. The only thing that I left out of this one is things like total fixed cost, total variable cost, and total cost. I only have the averages up here. Now, because a firm is in a purely competitive industry, it has to ask itself two questions. The first question is, because I have no power over price, should that particular firm produce? Remember, a firm in a purely competitive industry is a price taker. It has to take the price the market will pay. It cannot influence its price. So therefore, it has to ask itself, because I have absolutely no power over the price that I can charge for my good, should I produce? Well, the answer to that is that firm will produce as long as it can get a profit. That makes sense. Or as long as it can get a loss less than its fixed costs. Remember, the costs that must be paid, whether you produce, whether you don't produce, are the fixed costs, the rent, the equipment, the taxes, the insurance, those types of things. And therefore, if that firm can get a loss that is less than his or her fixed cost, he will produce. Let us assume that the firm's fixed costs, total fixed costs, are equal to $100. That firm has to take a look at this and say, okay, is there a point where I can produce a certain amount of a good? And although I'm not making a profit, I still have enough money to give to my landlord for rent for $40. I can give that person $40 towards my rent. I'm still losing $60. But if I don't produce, I lose $100. In this situation, I can produce a particular amount. I pay off all of my workers, and I have $40 left over. And I can give that to my landlord and tell the landlord, bear with me, I'll get the other 60 to you next week or something like that. All right? This can only be done in the short run, because in the short run, you got to pay your fixed cost. And therefore, as long as you can get a loss that's less than your fixed cost, you will produce. The second question you have to ask yourself, if I decide to produce, what amount should I produce? What quantity should I produce? Well, should that firm decide to produce, assuming it gets a profit or a loss less than its fixed cost, that firm will produce at the point where my marginal revenue is equal to my marginal cost when my marginal cost is increasing. It is equal to my marginal revenue when my marginal cost is increasing. My marginal revenue is equal to my marginal cost when my marginal cost is increasing. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. Now, we have to understand that this is not going to be an exact equality. My marginal revenue is 50, my marginal cost is 50. Let's assume for a moment that my marginal revenue is $50. My marginal cost is $49. We would say or assume that that is the point of greatest equality. But it has to be higher on marginal revenue side, because if my marginal cost, the extra cost, is higher than this, I lose money. And we don't do that. All right? We don't want to lose money. So therefore, we have to assume that this is the equality, but even though we're saying it is the equality, it must be the higher on marginal revenue side. Okay, in the second question we asked ourselves, we said that if a firm does choose to produce, does receive a profit, does make a profit, or get a loss less than its fixed cost, we will produce, but because of that production, what point, at what quantity will we produce? The answer to that particular question was we will produce at the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost when marginal cost is increasing. That's an extremely important point, and we want to examine that a little bit further right now. And what we want to do is, we know that our marginal revenue curve is equal to my demand curve, is equal to my price. It is perfectly elastic. In other words, that the firm has to take the price the market will pay. We learned from a previous chapter, I believe the cost of production, that our marginal cost curve was U-shaped. It's U-shaped because of the law of diminishing returns. As I add a variable resource to my fixed plant capacity, at some point, my costs will increase. So I have a U-shaped marginal cost curve. Well, we said earlier that we will produce at the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost when marginal cost is increasing, and we want to see why that is. I have the marginal revenue points highlighted by red X's, the marginal cost curves highlighted by black indications. I know I produce the first unit because this is where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, so I produce that, as long as I'm going to get a profit or a loss less than my fixed cost. Do I produce the second unit? Well, if we take a look at my marginal revenue, which is the X, my red X, we take a look at my marginal cost, we see that my marginal revenue to produce this particular unit and sell the particular unit, the extra revenue that I'm making is greater than the extra cost it is for me to produce it. So I choose to produce that. We have to move into our third unit. Do I produce the third unit? Well, we can see that our marginal revenue is still above my marginal cost. The extra revenue that you're giving me to buy that good is greater than the extra cost to produce that good. Marginal means extra. Do I produce the fourth unit? Well, again, my marginal revenue, or the extra amount of money that you're giving me to buy that good, is greater than the extra cost it is to produce that good. I know I produce here. I know I produce here. But do I produce the sixth unit? Well, in this situation, we can see that my marginal cost is now greater than my marginal revenue. So therefore, I choose not to produce this sixth unit and choose only to produce at the point where marginal revenue is equal to my marginal cost when my marginal cost is increasing. There is an incentive for me to continually produce and sell more goods, because even though I might be getting less marginal revenue over my marginal cost, I'm still getting extra money. I'm still getting extra money, and I want that extra money. And therefore, there's an incentive for me to continually push to the next unit and produce that and sell it, up to the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost when marginal cost is increasing. Very important concept, and we're going to see that in a few minutes in another lecture that we have relative to this particular situation. Okay? Again, if you have any questions, email me, put them on the discussion board. By now you should know the routine. Thank you.